stories that I used in the article were very like, they're not major projects that we're talking about, major construction projects, like multi-billion rand projects. They're very simple projects, very simple stories, very community-based stories that make you see that even the smallest construction project, even if it's not a big value project, even if you're not working for that big construction firm or that big consulting firm, that even the little that you do has an impact. So this particular story is relates to a school that was opposite my cousin's place here in Cape Town. So I remember, like, there was a time I even stayed at my cousin's place for about 2 years. Construction had stopped at the school. They started building, and then up to a point it stopped. Apparently there were issues with the contractor, contractual issues. Contractor was off-site, and yada yada yada. And the pupils were studying in these prefabricated buildings without a formal school. And then things got resolved eventually. The school was finished, it was completed, it was a multi-story, I think it was a double-story school that they built. And I think it just ignited something within me, you know, like to recognize what that school meant for those children, you know, like, you know, when you come from nothing and suddenly you have something, you've got this facility, and perhaps now this school has got labs for all we know. Now they can do science experiments in class. Maybe they even have a library. Now they've got access to knowledge or to resources that they didn't have access to. What does that mean to that individual? What does that mean to just that one person? And I think for me, it's just this idea of recognizing that sometimes impact, because sometimes we think that if I've lived an impactful life, then it means that I've done big things. I've been like a Nelson Mandela who's affected millions and billions of people. You don't have to do big things. Even the smallest little act can actually translate to something big in the long run, because everything has got, it's like a chain, everything is connected to each other. And every action that you take got ripple effects, and there's other consequences that can come out of it, you know, even though it might look like you're doing something small. That small thing has got a bigger impact in the bigger scheme of things.
Yes or no?
I think we do at certain points in our careers, you know. There are moments. I mean, I remember my very first commercial building that I worked on as a QS. It was in Bryanston. It was this corner office, corner Bryanston and William Nicol. And it was a big project for me at that time. I think it was a 20 million project or whatever, but it was big. It was the biggest thing I'd worked on as a quantity surveyor. And it was one of those where I was involved from inception to end. Luckily, I hadn't left that job during construction, because I used to change work quite a lot. So, and every time I drove past it, you know, I always used to beam with this sense of pride, knowing that I was part of it, you know. I contributed to that. It's not like, I think what's nice about our professions is the fact that you've got something tangible that you can look at afterwards, that you can say, yes, I did that, whatever, even if it was a small component of the process, but I did something, like I did that drawing, or I did that design, or whatever, that bridge, you know. So there's always reminders that you see. However, being a technocrat can be boring work. It can be laborious, it can be repetitive, it can be the same thing you do over and over and over again, such that you get to the point where you may become disillusioned, and you may lose that appreciation for the end product, for what it is, what your efforts will yield in the end. And it's very tedious, right? Like managing a building contract, you have to deal with contractor issues, the negotiations, the fights, you know, all these administrative processes can make it so tiring, such that you don't really see what is it that I'm doing here, what is the bigger picture, what value am I adding, you know. So yes and no. So it really depends, you know, like where you are in terms of your career path.
Yeah.
So I think it's powerful. I mean, if you read the article, I talk a lot about the shifts that we are able to influence as a result of the work that we do, just by virtue of there being like if it's a commercial building, could be a retail building, shopping center, whatever. If there's an economic opportunity that you've created there for somebody else, there's employment opportunities that you're creating there, and it's also a lasting legacy in some instances. Some of the work that we do, like if you look at the projects, like big mega projects now, like the Gautrain, how it changed the shape of public transportation within the Gauteng area. Before, we never even thought that it was even possible for like your citizens to actually trust a train system, to actually feel safe in a train, you know. But by virtue of that project, you know, suddenly it shifted, it changed things. It put Joburg or Gauteng on the map, and it actually put it on the same stage as international cities, you know, because suddenly now we had the same level of infrastructure that other cities also have globally, like world-renowned cities. So that's power. That's powerful, I mean, in my opinion, you know. So it's not just about, like, yes, the processes that we follow are tedious, but what comes out or influence systematic changes, you know, system changes, like the way that society is organized, the way that our cities are organized. We've got that opportunity through some of our projects, and that's very important, and that's critical, and that's powerful in my opinion. And there's lots of projects that have been groundbreaking that we've seen come into play. For instance, in our construction, in property, we speak a lot about this idea of creating developments that allow for live, work, and play. And it's always a concept, like this idea of having mixed market development, you know, where you can have your residential spaces in one area, you have your commercial spaces there where people need to shop, the retail spaces, the office spaces, the gyms and whatnot. So we saw that, like, probably one of the most groundbreaking developments that was like that was Melrose Arch, for instance, the earlier versions. And then we went on to see like Maboneng precinct, which also embraces the same principles, but then the target market is different. It's a much more artistic and like market that you're targeting there. Whereas with your Melrose Arch, you're looking at a more affluent segment of society. So all these shifts, they change the way that we live. I mean, by virtue of having a shop on your doorstep, we don't have to drive. It has a huge impact because it's got an impact on carbon emissions. It's got impact. So there's always impact. What I'm trying to say, I could go on and on using different examples, but what I'm trying to say is that there's always impact, and with that impact comes power, because you're shifting how people are, how society is organized, how people do things, and how systems operate. I think it's important to feel that you are living a purpose-driven life. In my experience, through my life path, my career path, it got to the point where I needed to derive meaning from what I was doing. You know, there had to be more than just doing my technical, like contributing my technical expertise. You know, and I think everybody wants that, because with meaning, it sort of gives you energy. It gives you motivation to actually continue doing the work, because if there's no meaning to it, there's no purpose to it, then what's the point? So it's a way of perhaps even retaining some of the key skills that we need in this industry, because some people have actually moved on to other areas because perhaps they didn't see that value in terms of the work that they were doing. You know, they've moved on to other things. I think morale, you know, at the end of the day, we're human beings. Yes, we're doing this technocratic work, we're delivering these brick and mortar solutions, but we're human beings, and there's something deep inside of us that needs to be fed with the work that we do, and not only fed in economic terms, but fed at the level of who we are, at the level of our being, you know. So if you can recognize that through the work that you do, when you wake up, when you go to that job, you're not just going there to do the same old, but what you're doing is bigger than the simple tasks that have been assigned to you, then I think that's something worth aspiring to, and that gives you a reason to wake up. I'd like to think, you know, that's important. And I know most people tend to see these things as soft issues, and yet they're not, because if this engine that is the human being, that is who you are, is not fueled, is not, you're not putting fuel in it, you're not servicing that engine, you're not building yourself, you're not doing things that feel good, or you don't feel like you don't feel good within the core of your being, then it affects everything around you. It even affects the quality or the value, that the quality of inputs that you would give towards your work. So that's important. That's important in my opinion, and maybe it's age that's talking, I don't know, but it's important. And I'm not saying, I'm just chatting now, and I'm not saying I'm saying this from a place of being accomplished in life, like as if I've reached the pinnacle of my career. I haven't, there's still lots of ranks and lots that I still need to climb. But I think it just there's a point where you realize that it's not just about your professional discipline, and you see it in a lot of youngsters that want to make a difference, and they pursue maybe outside of the formal environment interests, where they're there to share knowledge, to share their expertise with others, to pass on knowledge, pass on skills, because you want to feel that you're contributing, and it's important.
No,